This is Pulse of Africa, the face and voice of Africa. The story of resurgent and burgeoning Africa is here, only on the Pulse of Africa channel. Pulse of Africa, the face and voice of Africa.
Hello, this is Pulse of Africa News. I am Samia Mohammed. We cover inspiring stories and key moments shaping Africa. We'll start with Ethiopia and Germany. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed today received German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul at his office in Addis Ababa. In a social media post following the meeting, Prime Minister Abiy said discussion focused on further strengthening the long-standing partnership between Ethiopia and Germany. In other development, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Dr. Gedeon Timotheos, held discussion with Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, Johann Wadephul. He said the two sides held detailed discussion on bilateral and multilateral cooperation between the two countries. Foreign Minister Wadephul is in Ethiopia on an official working visit. Prior to his arrival in Addis Ababa, he visited Kenya, where he held talks with President William Ruto and other senior government officials. Africa and Germany are closely connected not only by geography but also by shared strategic interests spanning security, trade, climate action, and global stability. As global dynamics continue to evolve rapidly, Africa is increasingly emerging as a central actor in international affairs. The visit underscores Africa's growing global relevance and the importance of partnership built on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and collective action. The African Group has renewed its call for comprehensive reform of the United Nations Security Council, reaffirming Africa's long-standing demand for fair and equitable representation in both permanent and non-permanent categories of membership. Delivering the African Group statement at the first plenary meeting of the intergovernmental negotiations during the 80th session of the UN General Assembly, Ambassador Kalilu Ibrahim Totengi, Deputy Permanent Representative in Charge d'Affaires of Sierra Leone to the United Nations, said Africa remains united and firmly anchored in the common African position on Security Council reform. The African Group stressed the need to maintain political momentum this session by focusing on practical outcomes, building on the consensus reflected in the Pact for the Future while narrowing differences among member states and interest groups. Central to Africa's position is Action 39 of the Pact for the Future, in which heads of state and government committed to reforming the Security Council to make it more representative, inclusive, transparent, effective, and democratic. The Pact explicitly recognizes the urgent need to redress the historical injustice against Africa as a priority, while also improving representation for other underrepresented regions, including Asia, Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The group recalled that when the United Nations was founded in 1945, Africa was largely unrepresented, and that despite the expansion of the Security Council from 11 to 15 members in 1965, proportional representation has failed to keep pace with the growth of UN membership from 51 to 193 states. This imbalance, Africa argued, continues to undermine the legitimacy and effectiveness of the Council. Reaffirming its united stance under the Izulini Consensus and the Sirte Declaration, the Africa Group emphasized that these instruments remain Africa's single non-negotiable framework for reform. The group underscored that equitable geographical representation must remain the cornerstone of any reform outcome, noting Africa's size, population, growing role in peace and security, and the centrality of Africa-related issues on the Council's agenda. Africa reiterated its demand for expansion of the Security Council in both permanent and non-permanent categories, as well as a fair resolution of the veto question. While maintaining that the veto is an undemocratic instrument that should remain ultimately be abolished, the group insisted that as long as it exists, it must be extended to all new permanent members on the basis of equity. On cross-regional representation, the African Group reaffirmed that geographical representation must remain the primary basis for reform, while expressing openness to discussing cross-regional arrangements where they complement rather than undermine regional balance.
In Ethiopia, more homes and businesses now have access to electricity. Access to power supports education, healthcare, and local businesses. Light changes lives.
The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, received Johann David Wadufol, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Germany, to discuss the EU-Germany partnership and shared priorities. The two sides reaffirmed their commitment to multilateralism, peace and security, sustainable development and human rights. Chairperson Yusuf welcomed Germany's announced support for €88 million for 2026 and 2027 and its backing of a key EU initiatives including peace building, good governance and migration management, the EU safety and the flagship projects such as the EU border program and AfriPol. They also exchanged views on regional and international security, highlighting the need for inclusive dialogue and African-led mediation in the Great Lakes region and Sudan. He reaffirmed that the African Union is a natural partner for Europe, highlighting shared values of integration, rule-based cooperation, territorial integrity and political sovereignty.
Germany also plays a peacekeeping role on our continent. It has to be recognized. Germany is chairing the contact and coordination group on the Great Lake region. Despite the unconstitutional change of government, Germany maintained its cooperation with the Sahel countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The German government also supports the African Union border program and AfriPol. And Germany has also been the driving force of the G20 Compact with Africa, a very important program aimed at mobilizing private capital for investment and the creation of job opportunities in our continent. Therefore, the African Union Commission values its relationships with the federal government of Germany, and I would like also to seize this opportunity to commend Germany's leadership in global decision-making. We all know that the international order is being disrupted. That creates a sense of uncertainty and unpredictability for the future. And it's certainly not helpful, nor can we properly plan the full execution of our peace and development agenda. Let us hope that reason and wisdom will prevail over reckless and disrupting decisions that have global impacts. Once again, welcome, Minister, and thank you for your presence here today at the African Union headquarters. Thank you.
Minister Wadufol reiterated Germany's support for Africa-led peacekeeping and Africa's push for UN reform, including Permanent Security Council representation. The meeting concluded with a mutual commitment to further strengthen EU-Germany cooperation in advancing Africa's peace, stability and continental integration agenda. Zambia has announced its readiness to implement the bilateral agreement of cooperation with Switzerland under the international carbon market, a move aimed at advancing climate action while supporting sustainable development. Minister of Green Economy and Environment Mike Mfosa described the agreement as a milestone for Zambia's leadership in climate initiatives and sustainable development. The partnership will allow both countries to meet their climate targets while promoting environmental integrity and economic growth, with projects spanning agriculture, forestry, energy, transport and tourism. This agreement is not just about climate mitigation, it's also about development opportunity that will create jobs, strengthen community and advance national sustainability priorities, Minister Mfosa said. Zambia has established strong governance frameworks, clear approval process and capacity building measures to ensure readiness for international carbon market anchored by the Green Economy and Climate Change Act and regulation. Switzerland's Ambassador Stephanie Ray welcomed the cooperation as a model of trust and people-centered climate action, emphasizing that the partnership will translate global climate commitments into tangible benefits for African communities. Now to business news. Ethiopia has generated more than $5.1 billion in export revenue over the past 6 months, exceeding its set target, the Ministry of Trade and Regional Integration announced. Speaking at a 6-month performance review of the 2018 Ethiopian fiscal year, Ethiopian Minister of Trade and Regional Integration Kasaon Gofe stated that the country had initially planned to earn $4.42 billion from exports during the period. However, actual earnings surpassed expectations, reaching over $5.1 billion, representing 120% of the target. According to the minister, the revenue marks an increase of $1.83 billion compared to the same period last year, reflecting significant growth in export performance. Mr. Kasahon noted that the achievements are laying a strong foundation for Ethiopia's economic revitalization and institutional development. He also highlighted ongoing efforts to implement the Digital Ethiopia 2030 strategy within the trade sector. As a part of digital transformation, more than 2 million trade registration and licensing services have been delivered online nationwide, improving efficiency and accessibility for business. The minister further emphasized that the government is working with a focused and coordinated approach to achieve its overall export revenue target of $9.4 billion by the end of the fiscal year. At the Africa Collective Davos 2026 held on sidelines of the ongoing World Economic Forum, Afreximbank underscored the critical role of shared digital infrastructure in accelerating Africa's trade expansion and economic integration. Speaking during a session on the digital economy on the African continent, Ekene Uzo, director of the Group Management Office at Afreximbank, positioned the digital economy as the backbone of scalable trade across Africa. He emphasized that the bank's priority is the development of the continental digital rails that integrate trust, data, payments, and connectivity, ensuring that the African continental free trade area translate into real economic activity rather than remaining a purely legal construct. Uzar noted that without interoperable digital systems, cross-border trade within Africa will continue to face fragmentation, high costs, and inefficiencies. Building shared infrastructure, he argued, is essential to unlocking full value of intra-African commerce. Afreximbank highlighted its growing role in enabling its digital ecosystems through flagship platforms such as Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which facilitates real-time local currency cross-border payments across African market. The bank is also advancing digital trade infrastructure that supports due diligence, market intelligence, and business-to-business linkages across the continent. These efforts are being strengthened through targeted investment in emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, digital identity frameworks, and advanced data systems supported by innovation labs and policy-aligned experimentation. Collectively, these initiatives are laying the foundation for Africa's digital trade backbone, one designed to support scale, economic sovereignty, and inclusive growth as the continent positions itself more strategically with an increasingly digital global economy. Now to sports news. The Total Energies CAF Champions League 2025 and 2026 and the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup 2025/26 return this Friday, 23rd January, as match day 3 of the group stage gets underway across the continent. Following the conclusion of the Total Energies CAF Africa Cup of Nations Morocco 2025, attention shifts back to the club football, with Africa's top sides resuming their continental campaigns. Having completed 2 rounds of group matches before the AFCON break, match day 3 marks the halfway point of the competitions, making it a decisive moment in the race for quarter-final qualification. In the Total Energies CAF Champions League, the action kicks off in Cairo, where record champions Al Ahly host Tanzania's Young Africans. South Africa's Giants Mamelodi Sundowns take on Sudan's Al Hilal Omdurman in Pretoria later on Friday, a key fixture that could shape Group C standing at the midpoint of the campaign. Other Marrakech encounters include the Group A clash between RS Berkane and reigning champions Pyramids FC on Saturday. Over the weekend, clubs across Africa will continue their push for group supremacy, with teams looking to consolidate strong start or revive their hopes of progressing to the knockout stages. That's all for this hour. Thank you for tuning in and goodbye.